Well, I told Pamela just before we came in, can I go first? And you see why. I knew that was coming. But congratulations to you. Thank you to Jack Benz for welcoming on behalf of our board. I did see some puzzled faces out there when Jack said he graduated from the first class at Belmont. He meant since we were a four-year institution, not 1894, but 1955, okay? Because everyone's saying, wow, how did he do that? But it is a wonderful evening to celebrate stories just like you heard. And there are other stories like that in this class, in every class. And it's a wonderful privilege for all of us, for our faculty and staff, for all of us to be a part of the lives and of transforming these lives. At Belmont, we have a practice that the president delivers the commencement remarks. It is a result of a survey of students when we asked them what kind of commencement speaker they'd like to have, and they said they didn't want one. So I'm the closest thing you can get to that. And so, and I tell that same line every time. And also, always, my favorite quote, which I always throw in here, is from Garrison Keillor, who said, "The commencement speaker is like a small, dark cloud passing over what is otherwise a joyous and happy occasion." So I'll try to make it very brief always and not so dark. But I'm going to start with like a cloud and ask you, is it just me, or is this world in a real mess right now? Look at our economic woes. Look at our debt crisis specifically. Look around the world at the upheaval and chaos. I mean, for goodness sakes, even London is not acting properly right now. The political upheaval in the Middle East, the famine and starvation that's going on in Somalia and Ethiopia, where a bunch of thugs are preventing children from receiving the food they need just to survive, and they're dying. While even my Cardinals are 4 games out of first place in the Central Division. In Milwaukee, for goodness sakes, what is happening? Okay, that one doesn't count, I'm sorry. But you look around the world, and there's a lot of dark things going on. There's a lot of anger. There's a lot of meanness, a lot of exploitation, hunger for power and control, fear, and competition. Not just competition, but competition gone crazy. What is it we're missing today? What's the missing ingredient? And I thought about that some, and I think it's the word. I think the word is grace. I want to talk to you just very briefly about that word, grace. But I'll tell you, before I tell you what I think it is, I'll tell you what I think it's not. And grace is not about fairness. Grace is not even about justice. Justice is a good thing, but grace can be so much better than justice. So what is it? Well, to define grace, I always turn to, when I'm searching for answers to these words, I always turn to my songwriter friends and ask for definitions. And Bono said it well. He wrote a great song for you too, called Grace. How many of you? I'm just curious, students. Yeah, you know that song, but a few of you do. But in that song, these lines are embedded. Grace, it's the name of a girl, but it's also a thought that can change the world. And he goes on to say, grace finds goodness in everything. Grace makes beauty out of ugly things. So, grace, it's the name of a girl. In this case, it was the name of a woman, Grace Stum. Grace passed away this spring at the age of 99. I never personally met this Grace, but about 4 years ago, a mutual friend made Grace aware of some work that Judy and I were doing together, and Grace began writing us notes just out of the blue, sweetest notes, and they just come in the mail, and I'd read them. like the one that came just a few days before the presidential debate was held right here on this spot, where she wrote to me. She said, "My dear friends, Bob and Judy, I find I am saying this little prayer quite often recently. Dear Heavenly Father, please keep Judy and Bob in the palm of your hand as they deal with all the details of the coming event. The world will focus on it. Use them, guide them, instruct them, lead them." And she goes on. She was not a short prayer. She wrote long prayers. Her friends told me she'd call them on the phone and said, "I want to pray for you a minute." And 15 later, they said, "Look, I really do have to get going." But she was just the sweetest thing. And she wrote the sweetest notes. And believe me, not every note I get is a sweet note. And you could say, "Well, you don't deserve all sweet notes." And you're exactly right. But remember, we're not talking about what I deserve. We're talking about grace. Grace found beauty in everything. And grace, then, it's a thought that changed the world. And I can't think of that word without thinking of God's marvelous, infinite, amazing grace. It is the most powerful thought that can change our world. And it's knowing and accepting that grace that changes hearts and brings out the very best in people. We saw grace all around us just a little over a year ago, right here in Nashville, when parts of our city were devastated by the floods. We saw grace in the wake of the terrible storms this past spring. Especially, we saw it with our friends just to the south of us in Alabama, where grace was revealed. Last Sunday evening, I was reading an article by Rick Bragg in Southern Living. And guys, I was in the airport. I'd run out of stuff to do. I'd read all the man stuff, and so that's why I was reading Southern Living, okay? I mean, I just want you to know, at least it wasn't Martha Stewart. But I was reading this. Judy handed me this article, and I started reading it. Rick Bragg, award-winning, Pulitzer Prize-winning author, wrote about his experience in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, from the tornadoes. His home was wiped out on a beautiful street. And he describes a scene where one of his neighbors, Mary Pitts, was standing in the midst of this total destruction of what was once the most beautiful tree-lined historical street in Tuscaloosa. And neighbors, though, were helping each other and checking on each other and turning their attention to them before they took care of their own needs. And her observation that he recorded was that she said, "I always thought we lived on a good street. Now I know what makes up a street." Because grace makes beauty out of ugly things. Bragg also tells a story of awakening one morning after the storm to hear the tap, tap, tap on his roof of a hammer. He learned that his neighbor, James Mize, had scaled the roof and tacked down some coverings that had blown loose. Bragg says, "He did not ask me where I went to church or how I voted or who my family was. He did not climb that ladder for money or for attention or even for thanks. He did it," he said, "because it looked like rain." Wow. I started with a rant about the state of the world. But what if gracious people like Grace Stum and Mary Pitts and James Mize were our leaders? Let's not give up. I still believe this can be a wonderful world. Why? Because of you. I'm counting on you. It's your turn. Take over and show some grace as you do it. I close with the words of Fight for Fighting from the song World. And I challenge you, what kind of world do you want? Think anything. Let's start at the start and build a masterpiece. And be careful what you wish for. History starts now. Start now. Now. Thank you.